and welcome back to Kitten Lady and Friends. It's my new interview series where I'm talking to some of the most fascinating experts in cat welfare about different topics that will help us make the world a safer place for cats. I want to thank Royal Canin for partnering with me as part of their continuing Catology education series. And I want to remind you that we have an exciting kitten cam throughout. So we will be able to check in on all of the babies who again, are asleep here. We'll be able to check in on these little guys as they wake up from their nap throughout. But you guys, you're here for the kittens, of course, but you're also here for the guests. And I want to introduce my guest today. I'm super excited to talk to him. My guest today is John Peaveler. He is the Lieutenant of Emergency Services for one of the largest shelters in the world, the San Diego Humane Society. It's also my local Humane Society here in San Diego. So I'm really excited to talk with him. He is going to be sharing a lot of exciting information about disaster preparedness, ways that we can be prepared for any disasters that come up with our cats. I met John when we were actually in Puerto Rico. We were there doing some work on a spay-a-thon, and it was a really just impactful, wonderful time. These are some shots of us working with some cats who were recently spayed and neutered. So John is a total pro. I'm very excited to have him on today to talk all about disaster preparedness. Before we bring him on, I have a video that I'd like to show that really shows the work that he's doing. This is a video of a disaster response from Hurricane Florence. So let's take a look.
My PFD is pretty well rigged. I've got my gloves, I've got a green laser and a signal mirror and all that kind of stuff.
Floodwaters were anywhere between knee and waist deep water. The dogs were in the water.
One of 5 dogs that he's just rescued.
Good boy.
Past the rivers, National Guard are out, building all the walls. But yeah, the flood's a lot worse than what I thought. So yesterday was pretty full on.
To rescue 2 bulls and a heifer.
It took us a good part of the day to get them bundled and packaged and then swimming next to the boats. It was very, very complicated for sure to try to get them out.
We're glad we were able to get them out because I don't think they would have survived.
Just grateful for the opportunity and worked with a great team, so we're really lucky for that.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you so much, John. Welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. That brings back some memories.
Oh my gosh. My heart was beating the entire time I'm watching that, pounding, because it's really, really intense. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to you today because, as you might know, I'm a little bit of a worrier myself. I'm a person who likes to be prepared and have a plan for everything. And I'll be honest, when I see a video like that, I don't know that I really am fully prepared if something like that were to happen. And so I know, with anything disaster, probably even more important than disaster response is disaster preparedness, how we personally prepare for these types of things that can occur. So can you talk a little bit about, even just for me or for the people watching, what should I be doing to personally prepare my cats if there were some kind of disaster to happen?
Yeah, and I think first of all, everybody needs to know what the risks are in their community. What type of events are most likely to occur where you live? I'd say one of the benefits of living in the South is that a lot of the hurricanes take quite a while to get to you, so you have quite a lot of lead time. Whereas those of us living in the West face a lot of wildfire danger and a lot more earthquake danger as well, where there's much less time to be prepared. You could have as little as 10 minutes to get out. So in either case, you need to have all of the basics that your animal needs at all times. So crates, and whether we're talking about cats or dogs, you need a crate to keep your animal contained, because you're not necessarily sure where you're going to end up, although that is part of the plan. If your animal has medications, you need to have at least a couple of weeks worth. And it's not something you want to try to deal with during a disaster. Is trying to figure out, is your vet open? Can you get a new relationship with another vet? Have an on-hand supply that's going to last at least a couple of weeks. Food, if you have special food, especially for someone like you who's doing a lot of foster, you have a lot of animals in your house. I'd imagine you have several different diets. So certainly a lot more complicated. Your go bag is going to be a lot bigger than most people. I have
My go
four
bag is like
dogs.
a suitcase, probably.
Yeah, or just a separate vehicle that's your disaster vehicle. I don't know. Definitely quite a bit, but you just got to think through everything. And you could start on either end of the spectrum. Where are you going to go? So that's a really good question to ask yourself. You don't want to end up in a public shelter unless you absolutely need to. And if you need to, that's what they're there for. So don't be afraid to go there. But if you have another option, have a plan for that. So if it's a hotel, like how far are you going to go? How far are you willing to go? Do you have friends? Do you have family that you can go with? Just have a brief conversation with them. Like, hey, if we ever have a fire, can I crash at your place? By the way, I'm going to bring how many animals? That's an important part of that conversation. Are they going to fit? Are they going to work with their animals? If I go to my parents' house, they've got one cat and one dog. We could probably make it work. But if somebody's got a pack of 6 dogs or 20 cats or whatever, maybe not the best place. So you really got to think through where we're going to end up. And hotels, you got to realize that most hotels don't take pets, or if they do take pets, they take a certain number of pets or a certain size of pet. So all things to consider. You could camp if you've got an RV. We see all sorts. Just think through that part as well, where you're going to end up. But in the meantime, you got to have water bowls. You got to have your medication. You got to have food for at least a couple of days. In the U.S., generally, it's not going to be that hard to find food once you're out of the immediate disaster zone. You can get to the next nearest Walmart if you've got to cross county lines or whatever. Shortages are usually near the epicenter of a disaster. So have enough to get you through a couple of days. I've got four dogs and a cat. Our daughter, actually, our 12-year-old daughter, took on the cat's package. So the crate is ready. There's a little bag of food and everything on top of it. Make sure that your records are ready. Make sure your microchip has correct information on it. Make sure your animal is tagged, all those things. Make sure you have a good photo of your pet. So photos can help if you get separated from your animal. They can help with reunification in a big way, both in being able to show that or do posters or whatever situation you end up in, but also digital resources like Finding Rover, being able to do a digital connection back. Facial recognition has come a really long way and is a great tool. So just really thinking through, like, what are the things you need every day for your animal, and do you have those, and are they portable enough? And then realize that you got to layer this into your own plan for your own self as well. Like, do you have medications personally? Like, how long is it going to take you to get your stuff together, and then your animals on top of that? I think in a lot of ways, the animals a little, for me, easier to have them ready. Their stuff is ready, so I'm only going to worry about that. Grab my toiletry kit, grab a little bit of clothes, throw it in a bag, and go. But the pet, you don't want to forget stuff for the pet. Because I know that I can live in pretty austere circumstances for a couple of days. Like, I forgot, whatever, I'll manage. But your pet does not have the ability to say, I'm going to skip the next couple of meals. I'm good. I'm on a diet. It doesn't work that way. We need to provide all the same basics that we normally do, just in a different setting. And a lot of shelters will have the basics for you. But it's best to be prepared with your own things and appreciate that having your own things will make your animal more comfortable as well, wherever you end up. And crate train. Last but not least, crate train. Make sure it's not going to be a battle to get your animals into their crates.
So that was going to be the next thing I wanted to bring up because, I can create a go bag. And yes, when I think about all my foster kittens, the thought of a go bag is a little bit more overwhelming. A lot of things need to go into it. But when I think about, because I lived on the East Coast my whole life, and then I moved out here 2 years ago, and it's true that the potential disasters that can occur here occur quite quickly. I experienced my first very, very small earthquake this year. And I was like, what is this? This is a totally new experience for me. And thinking like about a quick thing, I know with putting my cats in a carrier, it's always like a thing that takes some coaxing and some time. When I know that, this is a picture of Coco in her carrier, and she's willingly in this carrier because this was when I was moving. And in this scenario, I left the carrier open for like 2 weeks before I was moving because I was like, I want her to just use it as a bed and see it as a very comfortable place. So, that works when you're planning on that. But is that something that I should just do all the time? Like, should I just always have a carrier open? Or like, I just am picturing in the heat of the moment, you're like running around trying to wrangle all your cats. Like, how do you is there like a technique for getting a cat into a carrier when you're scared and they're scared and things are happening really quickly?
I think for one thing, it's going to come down to the behavior of your individual cat, or cats plural. How do they respond? Like, are they happy to go into a box? And do you have issues with that? Do they have issues with that? That's going to change what your approach is going to be. If it's bad enough, I would definitely consult an animal trainer. There are a lot of resources out there for that. Desensitization is huge. So if they're used to going in it and nothing bad ever happens and they get rewarded, certainly with dogs, we just feed them in their crates. Traditionally love food. So if the crate is always a good positive place, then it's a good positive place. And if it's not, if it's just a place you shove them in for the vet, then that doesn't help you during an emergency at all. It doesn't help you when you need to take your animal to the vet, which you're going to need to do anyways. So crate training, I think, is pretty universally important for any animal owner. But it's gonna vary a little bit. But it certainly can't hurt to have the crate accessible and it just be one of the places where your animal sleeps. Other options are, so like your crate in this picture, you can peel the top back, so you can make it more open and less constricting and scary. So when you're desensitizing, you can do that. With plastic crates, you can remove the top, so they're just going into half, and you can just do it in stages. So it really just depends on where your individual cats are, how long that process might take. So you can do half a crate and feed in there, or do treats, make it into a bed, and then slowly convert it back into a full crate to where there's no lingering fear or concern around the crate.
Sure. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I kind of wonder like how you balance like stress reduction and just urgency in some of these scenarios, because it must be a balance, right? Like you don't want to like throw a towel over your cat and wrap them up and like shove them into a box unless like you really have to. And then I guess that's something that you have to do. Are there things that people can do to make it a more calming experience? Or is that something that goes into like, is that part of disaster prep? Like, I don't know, like lighting a candle and making it very, very peaceful for them? Or is that really not something that we're thinking about?
I think we have to always acknowledge that animals cue off of our behavior. So if we're acting abnormally in their experience, then they're going to have some sort of response to that. The more worried and fearful we are, the more worried and fearful they're going to be. So I think it kind of comes down to like, what type of disaster are we talking about? Is there smoke in your neighborhood and the fire is coming down the hill? In which case you get it done as fast as you need to get it done. If you're in the South or the East somewhere where you're looking at, I've got 3 days and now I've got 2 days. All right, it's time to load the animals. Do it slowly and carefully. So it's just a balance.
Don't throw a towel over your cat.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to have repercussions. Like if they have a really bad experience during a disaster, there are going to be behavioral consequences to that. And that could be just, shut down in fear for a couple of days. It could be really long term. If you've been doing years of work with a desensitized cat or an unsocial cat, then you could be doing years more work. So, take that into account and control your own behavior as best you can.
That's really, really good advice. Now, speaking of kind of behavior and cats, I have my cat Coco here with me, and I feel relatively confident that I could get her and put her in a carrier. But I wonder, we have obviously a lot of people in our communities who feed cats outdoors, community cat colonies, and that's a different scenario. Sometimes you don't know where the cat is at that time, or these are cats who might be, fearful of humans. You can't just like pick them up and put them in a carrier. So do you have any advice for like community cat caregivers, people who have, cats in an outdoor scenario? What should they be doing differently to prepare for a disaster?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'd say never put your own life in danger for an animal, please. Like, do every reasonable thing that you can for your own pets and for any community pet, but don't stay behind when it's clearly unsafe to do so. You're not going to be able to do anything for the animal if something happens to you, and it's going to take rescue personnel. They're going to be pulled away from something else to come and rescue you. So that, I think that's first and foremost. Community cats are very resilient. We know that. They endure and experience quite a lot. If your colony is really well established and managed, and they are quickly trappable, and you have more time, by all means, if you can catch them and move them, do. Keep them safe for the duration. Again, it depends on the type of event. If the fire is burning down the hill, it's not the time. But if you're in fire danger area, identify places that aren't going to burn, any safe zones, and that's where you should concentrate food and water. That could be dirt field, big sports fields, anything that's just unlikely to burn all the way across, big parking lots, whatever. Put a bunch of resources in there, and then when it's safe for you to come back, and when law enforcement lets you come back because it's safe, they'll at least have resources there. And they are very resilient.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great advice.
You do what you can, but I think that's the same is true in hurricane zones. Again, cats are very resilient, and they're gonna get to high ground if at all possible. So don't leave them contained. Don't trap them inside of anything. If it's a flood area you're worried about, you can't catch them, put resources up high, as high as you can get them that a cat can get to, but obviously safe from wind. So it's not a perfect scenario. But, put resources in the safest place that you can. And get back when you can, and give them food and water.
That makes a lot of sense. So, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, which we currently are, I travel a lot. I do a lot of traveling to, speak at different conventions and conferences. And I know when I'm not home, that's the time that it scares me the most if there's something that could come up, because, I'm not personally here. So I'm wondering if you can kind of share advice for, like, obviously I have people who come and care for my cats if I'm not home, but what should I be preparing them in some way? Like, what should I be preparing for a cat sitter, and how many people should you have on call for your cats?
I think it depends a little on your lifestyle, how many people, but it's perfectly possible for that too. It's perfectly possible for any of us to be at work when a fire happens. So if we're talking a quick disaster, like, your neighbors should know. If you have a local like cart or dart or some sort of animal response team that is really proactive, let them know you've got a lot of animals, or your humane society, they may be able to help. As a very last resort, certainly, but let your neighbors know. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got multiple pet sitters, and make your evacuation protocol, or whatever you want to call it, as simple as possible. The crates are there, the food is there. Like, all you have to do is put them in. I mean, just like you try to do for everything when you're gone. Like, you lay out the instructions, everything's on the fridge, like whatever's going to work. I'm sure you're as conscious as we are with our pet sitters. Like, this is exactly what to do for each animal in each situation.
Oh, yeah.
If there's a medical emergency,
Yes.
this vet's first, then this vet, then this vet. You call this number, then this number, then this number. You just line it out, and just even having done that work just makes it just that much easier to respond during an emergency. But it's hard, when you have a traveling lifestyle. We travel a lot. I move around a lot for work as well. It's certainly a risk, and you need to have the best plan that you can. But I don't think there's
Didn't you
necessarily
have
perfect scenario.
You had an experience recently where you thought that there might be a disaster, that it ended up being a false alarm, right? But you were not home. Can
Yeah,
you talk about that?
that was terrifying. Yeah, the fire department was doing training, and they chose our neighborhood as their scenario training, and they used a radio frequency that's not reserved for training. So we had somebody monitoring that, and we didn't have. There was no time. Like by the time I would have gotten home, based on the intelligence we were getting off the radio, like the entire place would have been gone, which is horrifying.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and that's the
Wow.
reality
I'm
of
glad that that was
wildfire.
a false alarm, but it's
Yeah.
you realize that like that can happen to anyone. I think like when I think about the piece of paper I leave for whoever's watching my cats, I realize that I am missing some things, I think, because you know, I don't have my neighbors on call, for one. I have like people who are further away or like my vets on there, but maybe it is a good idea to include like neighbors who are aware. I wonder, do you have any advice for, or is it a possibility or a trend for like communities to come together for one another? Like, I know the dogs in my neighborhood, but I'm not sure who has cats in their home. Like, is that something that people should be doing? Like talking to their neighbors and exchanging keys or things
Absolutely.
like that?
Yeah, if you're in a disaster-prone area for whatever reason, if you're on low ground in a floodplain or near a floodplain, if you're in Hurricane Alley or Tornado Alley or Fire Alley, as big as that alley is now, you definitely should interact with your community. Like the more awareness there is of what animals are in the community and what the resources are, the better. There's no replacement for individual preparedness first and foremost, and community preparedness second. Those things are indispensable because however many response resources you have in your community, however many people do animal rescue and disaster or can come to you nationally or internationally or whatever the case may be, those are finite resources, very, very finite resources. And the worst hit neighborhoods get those resources. So the more people that had a plan and that didn't need help, the better. It helps everyone. It's the best thing for you and your pets, and it's the best thing for the responders that are trying to help the animals that need them most.
Sure. So, so we talked about individual response and community response, but, for those of us who work with or for rescues or sanctuaries or organizations that have like a larger volume of animals, what kind of preparedness do organizations need to be doing if you run a cat shelter or something like that? Who should be trained and how should they be trained, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, first and foremost, every organization has a responsibility to their animals in care. And while we're all really busy doing our day to day, we can't overlook at least what the greatest threats are to the well-being of our organizations, whatever that may be. Certainly, like basic fire plans, where any building can have a fire anytime. You've got to have conversations throughout your region. Who are your closest partners? Like, can you be sister shelters or sister rescues or whatever, where they'll take your animals and they'll work with you while you're getting back on your feet. Even if it's just a couple of days where you got to figure out something else, you got to figure out a boarding facility or something. And it depends on how big your organization is and what existing relationships you have. But have those conversations and have them early. Who are the people that are going to come out and do rescue? Are there, like, what groups exist in your area? So who can you count on to come help you? So if a hurricane is coming toward you and you can't get all your animals out, who you're going to call to help you do that? Do you have transport resources to move all of your animals? It really depends on the size of organization and how many vehicles you have. So that in and of itself is a big limiting factor. Do you have caging for every animal that you have in care at all times? And if you don't, start a cache or start a centralized cache that will serve multiple organizations or regionally. And that's what some of the teams do as well. Like they have a cache at the state level, at the county level, or something like that. So those are resources that organizations can pull from. Every disaster should be dealt with at the lowest possible level in terms of resources, people, everything. So if you can have a plan that will completely work for your animals in-house, awesome. And if you can't, then you need to go to the next concentric circle. So you need to talk to your city organizations, or you need to talk to other rescues in your area, or you need to go to the county or the state. And again, it depends on what size of organization you are, where that stops. National resources are exclusively for organizations that are overwhelmed in disasters. So it's not something that you should count on necessarily before an event, because if a national group is looking at 35, 100, 200, 1,000 organizations that have been impacted by a disaster, they have to allocate their resources just like anybody. And there are never enough resources for everybody to get everything that they need. So the more planning that you've done at the local level, the less support you need externally, the better off you're going to be. So don't count on the cavalry to come from a national organization. If you absolutely
you don't want to
need
be in that position if you don't have to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the very least, try to establish a sister organization. And if you're doing transport regularly and you're moving animals 200 miles, then 200 miles is a pretty reasonable distance to evacuate your animals. So, all right, we're going to bring our animals to you, and just have that conversation in advance. An area that a lot of organizations get hung up on is who's going to pay for what. So make sure you've had that conversation as well. If you're able to cover all of your costs, great. It can be a handshake deal. But if somebody's going to need to incur some costs, whether that's housing or food or veterinary or whatever, you really want to solidify what that relationship looks like in advance.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, like to have that ahead of time, because how stressful it is to be trying to evacuate animals and then also go through like the sort of like, how are we managing this relationship stuff? It makes so much sense that you would have that ahead of time. Something that I have been thinking about in prepping for this is that there's so many moving parts with what you do. It's not just going out and getting the dog from the roof of the flooded house. It's not just the personal preparedness part of it. It's like all these moving parts, and that takes individuals, that takes communities, that takes organizations, maybe different organizations partnering. I do have a video that I would love to show that is from out here. It's from the Camp Fire, which is in California. And this video is a different side of things. This is showing kind of the on the ground with the animals who were being sheltered. So I'd love to watch that video and then talk about it. Let's bring that up.
My absolute favorite moment of this whole experience was reuniting Missy, who's here, with her owner Harold, who bottle fed her and raised her from being a kitten, and he told her she's 25 years old. And so seeing them be reunited was a really great moment.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I like watched that already, and I don't know why I'm crying watching it again, because I know what happens. He's fine. He gets reunited. But that's just beautiful, and that's another side of things. And I know that, like, you're in your role, you're not just doing one little part. Like, you're overseeing all of that. So can you talk about, like, all the different types of roles involved, and like, what do those moving parts look like? How do they work together? And what's the most touching part of it for you? Like, what's the most meaningful part of it for you?
Yeah, I mean, disaster response is definitely really complex. The U.S. has learned a lot of really valuable lessons, particularly after Hurricane Katrina and then Superstorm Sandy. Again, there were big introspective moments at the national level. In 2005, we saw people stay behind with their pets, put their lives in danger, and people actually lose their lives because of it. Which resulted in a requirement that all areas provide sheltering that accommodates animals. So that was a huge change. And so we as San Diego Humane Society, but also nationally, many organizations We have to look at the field response side of things, where we're actually getting animals out of danger, and those are generally animals that got left behind for whatever reason. There's a large number of reasons why that can happen. We do that, and we also do emergency animal sheltering. And there are really there's three basic kinds of animal sheltering, but we break it down two ways. Animals that come with their owners, so you evacuate, you didn't have a place to go, and you come to usually going to be a Red Cross shelter, but there are other organizations that provide that as well. You bring your animal often it's side by side, so your animal will be in the gym and you're in the rec hall or whatever. And then also animal only shelters. So all those animals that get left behind, that get lost, that whatever happens, all those animals have to be cared for as well. So you're looking at, if you're an animal shelter and you have the responsibility of providing that service, which is generally going to be a city or county level type of facility, you have to care for all of your animals that you currently possess. And then you have to care for all the animals that come in during that as well, which is a huge, huge undertaking in many cases. And the Camp Fire is one of the more extreme examples. Certainly, I think the biggest after Hurricane Katrina, where Butte County cared for 1,400 animals for several months. And those were animals that were awaiting reunification, that people lost their homes. And so a lot of people didn't have a place to bring a pet, or they lost their whole life and their whole livelihood. And so they couldn't even take their pet yet, or hadn't even got to there, didn't know their pet was alive, or, just so many different scenarios. So the teams that go and do things like that, it's really heartbreaking. The Camp Fire especially was one of the worst that we've been associated with, for sure. It's just so much loss of life. So those moments of reunification are so important, because a lot of times you have to give an owner bad news, but when you can give them good news that you have their pet, that's huge, and it makes everything worth it. Absolutely. And then beyond that, so you bring these animals into care, you care for them for as long as you reasonably can, and then you find new homes for them. And so when you eventually get to that, and there's a lot of due diligence in that, like what is a reasonable amount of time based on the scope and scale of this? I mean, it could have been, if that animal could have been free roaming before the disaster, but we're still awaiting reunification. And if that doesn't happen, then we move on to adoption and we find happy endings for those animals. And that's a national effort, depending on the size of the disaster, where organizations start taking those animals from all over. My family actually adopted a cat from the Camp Fire. He only lived another less than a year, actually, but he had a happy ending. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to backtrack to something that you mentioned, because I think it's really interesting, which is about, there's animals who need shelter who have been separated from people, and then there are animals who have not been separated from people, and both the pet and the family need shelter. And I want to bring up a picture of actually the same trip where you and I were in Puerto Rico. When we were there, shortly before we came, there was a big earthquake in Guanica, and there were people in a relief shelter there. And while we were there, we wanted to bring a bunch of cat food donations. Something that we learned through, just talking with the local shelter there, was that they get a lot of dog food donations and not as many cat supplies. So I was like, well, I'm not going to allow that. We got my friend's car. We went to the grocery store. We bought every single thing of cat food on the shelf. I think they probably thought I was absolutely nuts with my giant grocery cart full of cat food. But we went to this relief shelter, and there was a cat there. I hope we can pull up his picture here. There he is. That's Charlie. And it was just amazing, because I got to talk to the family about their experiences. They had become separated from him, and they had gone back every day for several days at that point, and they'd found him. And I just was so happy to see that in this particular situation, they were able to, have housing for themselves and for their cat. And I wondered, is that common? Does every relief shelter allow a cat to be there? And if not, how do you find the ones that do? And I know that you mentioned some legislative changes around that. Can you clarify how that works?
Yeah, so not every shelter will take pets, but some of the shelters in your area are required to take pets. That's generally going to come out from the county or some official body. However, you get your emergency notifications locally, like we have an app, and then we have official Twitter accounts in San Diego County, for example. They will announce which shelters are taking animals. So not all of them will, but if you show up at the wrong one, they'll be able to tell you what is the right one as well. So it's just, they just balance it. Like, you can look at census data and figure out, roughly how many homes have animals. And they'll make more or less shelters based on both that and what the actual need ends up being. But some shelters are required to take pets and to accommodate the needs of those pets. And that's hugely transformative. If you can imagine losing your home, or even just the uncertainty of not knowing if your home is okay, like in a fire where you're forced to leave and you don't know until they let you back in, or you see it on the news or something. At least you've got your entire family is safe, and just having that knowledge is hugely transformative. Here locally, we do see a lot of people come to the shelters in RVs. So a lot of times we're just supplying basic needs. If you weren't able to grab enough food or any food or whatever, you could stay at the shelter in the parking lot, and we're there in San Diego County at least to provide resources for your pet. So it's kind of takes a lot of different forms, but there will be shelters in your community that will take pets.
Is that a way that people can help, if it's just, you're just a member of the community who's not been impacted by the disaster, is like donating food a way that generally can be helpful? And do you find that cat donations are harder to come by?
I don't recall ever having an issue of not having enough of one species versus another.
Okay.
I've also worked with mostly very large organizations for the last a while. So that maybe is a difference, but I haven't really come into a situation where we're just running out of a particular type of food, unless it's a specialty food for special diet. I have not had that issue. As far as donations, the number one thing that shelters want is whatever they ask for specifically.
Sure.
Every shelter is going to take whatever people bring them, but if they're asking for specific things, that's really what they need. So try to find out what it is that they're really asking for, because donation management can be a real problem when organizations start getting a lot of stuff that is not what they needed, and they still have to figure out how to distribute it, because we're required to maintain sort of donor integrity. So whatever you wanted to have happen with your donation, we have to figure out how to make it happen. So give what they're asking for. So if
Sure.
it really depends on the organization, but sometimes cash donations are just the easiest, because organizations can then use that for what they need operationally. But sometimes they'll just put out a call, like, we're opening a pantry because people don't have enough food. So whatever food you can bring, just bring food. So just keep your ears open to what your local organization is asking for in a moment. Don't necessarily assume that they're looking for certain things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, as someone who runs a nonprofit organization, I'm no stranger to people like wanting to give you, I think if everyone could give me all of their old towels, if everybody who wanted to give me all of their old towels gave me all of their old towels, I could open like a used towel warehouse. There's a lot of that people want to give, and it's so compassionate. When we need that, we're so grateful for it. But sometimes that's not what we need. And sometimes the thing that people want to give, like maybe they want to give food, but actually what's needed is like admin stuff, like pens and trash bags and things that maybe don't seem like, it's not the first thing that comes to your mind, but that is a really good point that you make, to, during a disaster, like maybe check in on your local organization's social media, see what they're asking for, and then just donate whatever that is, so that you're helping, even if it's like sending Sharpies, or masking tape or something that you're not even sure what it's for, but if that's what they need, that's...
Yeah, obviously we're hugely appreciative of all of our donors, but yeah, if organizations are asking for specific things, those are things that they don't have access to or whatever. A lot of organizations will have Amazon wish lists, and those are updated during disasters, or like San Diego Humane has a disaster specific one. So if you want to contribute to our disaster needs, we have a wish list for that. So it depends.
Yeah. So speaking of wanting to help, I know that, when there is a disaster, people are like eager to help out, but it's not like you can just like put on your rubber boots and run out into a flood and, work with you on evacuating animals, right? You need some kind of training. You need, the authority to be doing that. So can you talk about, for anybody who's watching this, who's like, wow, those videos are really heartwarming. I want to be a part of that. Like, do you have to work for an animal shelter to be able to do these things, or can you volunteer, and what kind of training do you need?
So it depends on the role, definitely. Like the role in the picture, that's highly specialized and requires a lot of training to do. And right now they're just playing around with rappelling, but they're training to do large animal technical rescue, which involves huge weights, lots of technical equipment. We operate about a 20-person team that does that, and they train monthly to keep their certification. A lot of training involved. You can't just show up. If we're talking about fire response, again, a highly specialized environment, law enforcement will not let you into a fire environment, no matter how badly you want to help, whether you own a horse trailer or whatever resources you can bring in the moment. If you're not trained and equipped and credentialed, then you can't go in. It's a huge liability to not have been trained on how to work around wildfire. So the field stuff, definitely you need specialized training. Local or regional bodies can provide that training, but it requires commitment to be prepared and credentialed before there's an event. It's not spontaneous. On the sheltering side, certainly all shelters need professional, they need sheltering professionals to operate, whether it's veterinarians, veterinary assistants, vet techs, shelter managers, behaviorists, whatever. But in many cases, there are some roles that are what we call just-in-time training roles, where you can do basic daily care with an hour of training or whatever is appropriate for the environment. They'll ask you some questions about what your experiences are and then apply you appropriately. Certainly all organizations prefer that you're already involved, that you already understand standard operating procedures, you understand sheltering, you understand animal behavior, animal handling, however you want to get involved. Getting involved beforehand is definitely better for the organization. They know you, they know what your capabilities are, and how much time commitment that is going to vary by organization. But being trained beforehand is always going to be better. But there are many roles in emergency shelters and sort of the bigger scale environments where just-in-time training does occur and you can get involved. But you need to be asked, or you need to ask the question, like, do you need support? So if you hear that they do need support and they're looking for someone that is you, they're looking for someone with your abilities or not abilities or whatever you have, awesome. Or reach out to your local organization, the organization you adopted from. How can I help? And if the answer is we need donations, or we need people to manage donations, or we need people to walk dog, whatever they answer, like that's the way that they need help in that moment.
Sure.
And especially when you get into resource poor disasters where there's not enough lodging, there's not enough electricity, there's not enough clean water, there's not enough food. You showing up can occupy resources that professional rescuers need, and can get you and others into trouble as well. And you cannot show up to floods without being credentialed, without having an MOU and being invited by the organization that has jurisdiction there. You will not be allowed, and police will escort you out of the area on the field side. So be invited, know what's being asked, and make sure that you fit the bill.
Okay. So I have a weird question, actually. I just am curious, as somebody who's working with animals in disaster scenarios, do you think that some people think that like animals can sense that something's going to happen before it does? Is that something that you've ever experienced? Or like, do you think, I don't know, I guess you hear things of like wildlife acting differently before a disaster and people didn't even realize that it was going to happen. And is that something that you ever have experienced, or do you think that's kind of an old wives' tale?
Well, I think that it's very true in some ways. So I think when you're talking about major earthquake, there are the magnetic field comes into play, and certain animals are connected to that in more ways than we are for sure. But animal senses are just more sensitive than ours in every regard. Like I know that my dog can smell things that I have no idea are occurring. My dogs usually alert to something happening long before I'm aware of it. And whether that's the smell of smoke, or like we live near Camp Pendleton where they're doing artillery live fires all the time. Like I know when that's like just starting to happen before I feel anything. They're just more in tune to their environment than we are. They have senses that are much older than ours.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like especially nowadays, people are very distracted. We're, on our phones, we're on social media, we're working hard. We're not necessarily like, I feel like my cat looks out the window all day and she's very aware when like a bird lands on a leaf, she knows. So it makes sense that they're paying attention more than we are. Maybe they're more present than we are.
So I think it's a mix of real and imagined because they're just more in tuned. And so we see that they already knew, and then we think that, they must have known 5 minutes ago, or we kind of push that out way beyond reality maybe.
Yeah.
But they're definitely better cued into this earth than we are.
Yeah. So they don't have a crystal ball and they're not like, able to foresee the future, but maybe they're able to foresee the present better than we are. Maybe not the future.
Totally.
Yeah. So, one of the kind of final things I wanted to talk to you about is the disaster that we're living through right now is a little different. It's not a flood, it's not a tornado, it's not a fire, but a pandemic is something I know I personally never even imagined living through. And it's a different kind of beast, right? We're not having to evacuate. We're having to go into our homes and stay there, and I'm wondering, I know you're on a task force, you're like leading a task force for this huge shelter to respond to coronavirus. And I'm wondering how has that been and how have things changed over the last couple of months? Because obviously the science is changing so much. The, politics around it are changing all the time. Every week we're getting different information. So I wonder, how is the pandemic impacting your role and how are you kind of seeing it play out?
Yeah, so part of my job is actually to think about things like pandemic. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I'm actually required to write emergency plans for our cities. We are contract providers for 12 cities, and so I did write a plan that incorporates pandemic. But I was really thinking like really bad flu season. 10 people are going to be gone for 2 weeks, but that plan put enough information in my brain and enough forward thinking that we were able to expand it really quickly. And I'm really proud of our organization for acting very, very quickly. As soon as we started seeing any community spread in the state of California, we took pretty aggressive action in purchasing vast amounts of personal protective equipment, what we could get, and we were very careful not to take things from the human hospital community, but to get enough things to protect our officers that are doing welfare checks and taking animals out of cruelty situations and things like that. We bought a lot of disinfectant so that we could keep our animals safe and we could keep everything else safe. In the early days, we didn't know if we were going to have to decontaminate all the animals that came in, whether it's all the animals.
Right? I remember that.
Or is it going to be just animals that came out of homes that had COVID positive people, or that we had to take from bedsides of people that are in the hospital? And at this point, we've had all those scenarios, but the simple answer was no, decontamination wasn't required. The risk of fomite transmission is really, really low. So getting it off of an object, and in this case, the animal would be the object, really, really low. We've also learned a lot about cat susceptibility to COVID. So we work really hard to avoid stress. I mean, we want to always do that. It's so important to avoid stress in any animal, particularly cats, because when they get stressed, they get sick. When they get sick, they need treatment and isolation, which makes them stressed. And so it's just that vicious circle. So it's just that much more important, whether we're looking at emergency sheltering or regular sheltering, avoid those stressful situations. Be really, really cautious if they came out of a COVID home, keep them low impact, low stress environment. Don't create the circumstances where it's going to move from a cat to another cat, which hasn't happened, or from a cat to a person, which hasn't happened. We want to avoid that. The few cases where cats have gotten COVID, or where there's some issues around dogs as well, it's been from the owner being in very, very close proximity to that person, breathing on them, and the animals were generally not symptomatic, or had very, very mild symptoms. We just don't want to exacerbate that. And I'm not a public health professional, much less a veterinary professional. But those are just things that are on our radar. Like, we don't want to create the circumstances where a new disease moves between other species, or in any new way whatsoever. We want to keep our people safe. We just made a commitment as an organization that we were going to prioritize the health and well-being of the most vulnerable people on our staff, and that we would take this very, very seriously. We take animal health seriously every day. Like, it's at the core of what we do as an organization, and at the core of what most animal welfare organizations do. And we're looking at animal health all the time. We're always looking at zoonotics. We're always looking at anything that can make an animal sick. How do we avoid that? How do we treat it? So we've just taken it very, very seriously from the beginning. And because we're an essential service, and we never close to the public, we just changed the way that we serve the public. And a lot of that's been for the better. Having to move everything outdoors has resulted in appointment-based adoptions, where people come and they get the animal that they want and they leave. They never have to enter the building. We've done all sorts of virtual consultations and pre-counseling on the phone, and just very, very little of anything that's transactional in person. Even the handoff of the animal, like if it's a cat, we set the crate on a table and you come up and you take the crate. So we took a very, very safe posture very, very early, and we've virtually stayed there, and we've been really really flexible and really proactive in figuring out new ways to serve the community and new ways to engage the community. It's taxed every department in every organization, I think. Like, how do we fundraise during COVID, and how are we going to do emergency response? That's right up my alley. And luckily, there are national organizations that have done a lot of work on that. Our Red Cross regionally is very, very proactive. So they've got a really good plan, and it's mostly hotel-based sheltering. If you show up to a Red Cross shelter, if they have to, they'll put you in a congregate setting for the least amount of time possible, and then you're moving to a hotel. If they can get you straight into a hotel, great. But it depends. Does it affect 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people? But they've got 90 hotels on their roster just in San Diego County that are ready to take people. Wow. And then we keep pushing that preparedness. More than ever, you want to avoid going to an evacuation shelter because of a pandemic. So have that plan. It all circles back to that. Have a plan that works for you, and have a plan that works for your organization.
And keep sanitizer by the door, and your gloves and your mask. I have since the pandemic started, I've left the house literally only to go to the San Diego Humane Society to pick up foster kittens and a couple puppies. I have gone to the vet, many times. And so and I've done, some work in the community with cats, but that's basically my entire life now, is being at home with cats or going out into the community to help cats. And, I think in my grab and go stuff now, it's make sure that you're also bringing things to keep yourself safe. So, your mask, your gloves, if you use gloves, your, disinfectant, totally makes sense to have to, I think having to make sure that during this time we're prepared for everything that is happening and everything that can happen. So I'm wondering, just, do you have any words of hope during this time for people who are feeling really discouraged? Because I think this is a really discouraging time for people, and it's a really scary time for a lot of people. I know for me personally, I'm really excited about the way that animal welfare is being forced to shift right now towards more community action and community-based solutions. And that for me gives me a lot of hope. Is there anything about this time that actually gives you feelings of hope for the future?
Yeah, on the animal welfare side in particular, we are being forced to change. And SDHS is a very, very progressive organization. We've thought of ourselves as a safety net for our community for a long time, but it's really, really difficult to make any sort of shifts when you've got 33,000 animals, just companion animals, coming into your shelter every year. So it's allowed us to build more trust with our community. We've had more animals in foster than ever before, and those animals in foster are generally happier. I mean, it's no matter how amazing your shelter is, a healthy animal in a foster environment is going to be happier because they get more one-on-one attention, and it's a more normal environment for a companion animal to live in. So in many ways, it's been a transformative moment for the animal welfare community, for anybody who is just brave enough to seize this moment and to look at it, not just as this affliction, but as an opportunity to learn and to grow. I think it's important for any animal welfare organization to always be introspective, and to not just do things the way you've always done them, because medicine changes and understanding of behaviors change, and how we shelter animals needs to change, how we engage with our community. And so we're at least here, and I know a lot of our other organizations around the country are doing it as well. We're really looking, if a shelter is largely a downstream solution, where all the animals are sort of falling into this funnel and they end up at the shelter, and then we have to figure out outcomes from there. How high up can we get out of that? Can we get to where you, Hannah Shaw, have a need for your animal that if we meet right now, it's not going to result in you giving up that animal? Then we're much better served meeting that need right there, because you're going to be happier, the animal's going to be happier, no one's going to love it as much as you do, and you're going to be heartbroken to have to give it up. And that's not the case everywhere and in all circumstances. Many animals are going to need to come to shelters. Like, shelters still need to exist. That's absolutely a thing. But just being introspective and being willing to think creatively, and to just problem solve, is huge. And I think at an individual level, I think we've all got to really look at, like, who can we be closer to now than ever before. For me, that's my kids, a no-brainer, and my pets. I spend more time with them now than I ever have. And that's been a huge blessing, as much as it's been a huge headache in some ways. I'm working from home twice a week, which is both a blessing and a curse, depending on what meetings I have. But that's huge. And our lives are so busy. And so, like, do I want to go back to exactly what we had, where I was just always busy and just running from emergency to emergency? Like, things are a bit quieter right now. And I think that's a blessing. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. It's definitely a hard time for all of us. But also focus on what good you can do, like whatever your passion area is. If you're into cat rescue and kitten rescue, this is a great time to engage your community. People are home, they're noticing animals more, they're engaged with those animals more. Whatever you're passionate about, you just got to modify your behaviors a little bit. Life hasn't ended. Humans have survived pandemics before. If you socially distance when you're together 6 feet or more, and wear masks and wash your hands, we can get through this, and we can still live full lives.
Yeah, I love what you said, and I think it is an opportunity. It is difficult, but it's an opportunity for people to, it's an opportunity for people who have never fostered before to try that out. It's an opportunity for us to be closer to our cats. My cat Coco doesn't leave my side ever, and it's lovely and wonderful until she deletes my entire document that I've been working on, and then I'm like, okay. But yeah, it is a real opportunity, and I feel really hopeful for the future of animal welfare as well. So I have one last question for you, and it's a silly question. So here's my question. It's a would you rather. So
Okay.
Would you rather, in a rescue scenario, would you rather be deployed to rescue a cat from the moon?
Okay.
Don't worry, you have all the protective gear that you need, and the cat, she can breathe on the moon just fine. Don't worry. That's Coco.
Okay, yeah.
Or would you rather go on a rescue mission to the bottom of the ocean, and why?
Oh man, that's challenging. Actually, I'm going to go with moon, and I'll tell you why. I ran a dive team in Kuwait, the country, for a few years, doing a lot of reef cleanup and some habitat protection work. So I've done the bottom of the ocean, and I have never been to space. So I would definitely choose the moon. I'm always up for an adventure, and that sounds like a big one. It
Okay,
reminds
I
me
like
of,
it.
It reminds me of a rescue we did once in Kuwait, actually. I think there were some illegal sheds built on a little tiny island, and they destroyed those sheds, and there were a bunch of cats left behind. And so that island was flat and looked like the surface of the moon, and there were like cats hidden in the rocks and stuff. And it was
Oh my
130 plus
gosh.
degrees and insane. So that reminded me of that bizarre story.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, you've got, I'm sure, a million great stories, although you've never been to the moon, but I'm sure that if you were deployed there, you would figure it out. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned a lot. I feel like I want to go write my disaster plan for my cats right now. So thank you for everything that you've taught me and taught everybody watching today. Where can people find out more about you and the program that you run? Where would you like people to check out more?
Yeah, our website is a great information resource, sdhumane.org. Same on Twitter, sdhumane. We update that. That's our source for disasters. So if we've got a disaster locally and you want to know what's going on with animals, check out our Twitter feed. But I think you can find all of our links from there.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, John. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Hannah. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I learned a lot. I got really emotional at points during that, and I feel like I'm better prepared now to have a plan for myself and my cats. So that was just a great conversation. I want to again thank Royal Canin for their partnership as part of their ongoing Catology series. It means a lot to me to be a part of that. They do have a great campaign right now, the Take Your Cat to the Vet campaign. And I just want to remind people you can learn about that at royalcanin.com/cathealth. I also want to say if you are struggling to access vet care, or you want to just talk to a veterinarian about something that's going on with your cat, you can go on that website and you can actually talk to a vet online for free through the partnership between Royal Canin and Ask.vet. So just head to royalcanin.com/cathealth to get started with that and access vet care. Thank you again for being here as part of these conversations. This is going to be going on for several more weeks. I have a lot of really exciting guests coming up. Next week, I'll be talking to Dr. Michael Delgado, who is a fantastic cat behaviorist. We're going to be talking all about cats and kittens and behavior. So definitely make sure you check that out. And in the meantime, stay curious, stay compassionate, and join me again for another episode of Kitten Lady and Friends. Bye, guys.